All right. Well, we're back. Welcome back to the Therapy Disruptors podcast. I'm Philip Crum, and I am joined by Kathleen Mills, licensed professional counselor and supervisor trainer. How are you doing, Kathleen?
I am well. I'm really glad it's Friday this week.
Yeah, I am too. It's been a fast, long,
Fast and
wet
long.
week.
There you go.
We just finished up another supervisor training class, one of your 40-hour training classes, and we had a full house, and everybody was happy, and everybody now has their S. BHEC really has their stuff together. I think we had out of in the class, there were 2 or 3 of them that already were supervisors. They took the class because they were interested in the training system that we offered, and they wanted a refresher, especially on the code, the ethics that we dive into very deep, so that's interesting. But the other 2 or 3 or 4 people in the classroom did not have their S. When we finish on day 2, you help them upload their materials to BHEC and pay their little fee, and within 4 or 5 days, every one of them had their S, so they're all official or
Mhm.
real girls, as you like to put
They
it.
were all very, very extremely happy with that process, unlike in the dishes days, right? Yeah, that was nice.
Yeah, doesn't take quite as long as it used to, does it?
When
I
supervisors
was
do all that homework, Philip, I'm just going to throw this out. It's a 40-hour class. There's a whole bunch of requirements to have the specific content in the course. Then there's a lot of
Mhm.
homework that I dish out to complete that 40 hours. And, I think immediate gratification should be had. It shouldn't ever be, more than 2 days turnaround because, you know, it just shouldn't. And this is probably, I don't know, it's been very consistent with very quick uploads and turnarounds. So if you're ever wanting to be a supervisor, I don't think it's taking BHEC near as long as it used to. They've got a system, it works. If you do everything correctly, it's done very quickly.
So I was wondering, I wanna throw something at you and let you respond. The question I wanted to bring up is, what do you see as your top 3 shortcomings in, new supervisor training? What are your top 3 things that you really think need to be
Well,
addressed?
certainly the code, the rule book itself. It's been very alarming to get supervisors, maybe the supervisor class, but especially associates. They have no understanding of the BHEC rule book that I essentially have broken it down into 3 sections, understanding the hierarchy of everything and how really the rule book is all attached to the state statutes of the state of Texas. They just didn't make this up. So the more you understand that, the better you're going to be. But my top concern is people really don't understand the rule book. If you're going to be a supervisor, you need to know it pretty cold to help that associate understand that this is probably a fundamental, very important thing in this state of Texas to really fully grasp while being supervised by a trained supervisor who knows the rule book cold.
Yeah, I think you might be being just a little bit too kind in these workshops we do. I think it's a fair statement to say that most of them don't have a really good grasp on the rule book. Not to beat up on anybody in particular, but it's not just the people coming out of grad school or the second career people, but it's not just the future associates that don't have a grasp on the rule book. It's the licensees that have been around for quite a
I
while.
would not disagree on that. And I do think that a big reason for that is nobody's really teaching those type of ethics except for practicementors.us that I know of. They're really not teaching the actual rule book itself. They may be talking about little updates here and there, but not a full comprehension type of education. That's never being done. And
You know why that is, right? Because it's not sexy
well,
and
it
can't
isn't
sell
sexy,
tickets.
but there is a way to teach it where it keeps people engaged, and I think I've done a pretty good job of keeping it very exciting. But that's a big, huge red flag in our profession. If you don't know the rule book, you're not going to understand the state and how it operates, and that your license is really attached to the state to which you belong, namely the state of Texas here, because we're in Texas. And you live and die by the state statutes. I mean, that's just how it goes. it's got more bravado now than it did back in the dishes days. So I'm really encouraging just mental health professionals to, take one of our courses, but that's a shameless plug there. But you really need to know your rule book and how this all fits. Okay. And once you do, the segue into how you operate your business on that level is going to be exponentially much more improved. That's my personal opinion.
Well, you do make learning the 100 different ways to lose your license kind of appealing.
I guess I'll say thank you to that.
Yeah.
Okay. Thanks.
Uh-huh. So what's
Well,
number test?
one of the it's really alarming, and this is on both sides, but the lack of the relationship that associates have with money. If you think about it, none of the associates, hardly anybody, I'm not picking on associates, but many people who graduate from college have never done a deep dive in money and how to handle it. And that is a huge issue here. They don't have a relationship with money largely because, for instance, an example would be all their schooling has been deferred through student loan and the debt keeps piling up, but they're not really thinking about it because they don't have to have that relationship until after everything is done. And then they're slapped with a, let's pretend $85,000 hit on student loans. And then they're crying because they can't afford it. Well, you couldn't afford it before, but you didn't have that relationship with the money before you got this started. And I think the academia has really perpetuated this in terms of, well, it's deferred and it's a monthly payment similar to a car payment and probably more than a car payment. And for some people, it's more than a mortgage per month for the rest of your life. And so you graduate these beautiful people with a lot of debt and they don't know how to manage their expectations about it, what they need to do in order to pay it off. And so it really puts the supervisor in great jeopardy. And largely, anybody who's hiring, right? You don't have to be a supervisor to understand that grad students are feel entitled to ask for an incredible amount of money with no experience whatsoever. They don't understand that level because they're saddled with this debt. And as a supervisor, I've seen this time and time again. My heart breaks for them. I mean, it's kind of not their fault, but it kind of is their fault. But it's more of the fault of the system that never teaches having that relationship with money in a very good way, a very functional way. Stay within your means, that
Yeah.
whole thing. So
Yeah.
that's a huge hurdle for supervisors who are going through them with that 3,000 hours. With them every single time that they meet, even if they don't talk about it.
Most graduates looking to get a license, they're not entrepreneurs by nature. They're just not, male or female. They're not entrepreneurs. They don't think like business people. A good entrepreneur is going to approach things from a mathematical equation point of view. Life is a math equation. I learned early on your splits with an associate should be based on your expenses. You should know what your expenses are. Most people don't know what their expenses are until the bills show up with the red letters on them. Then they start looking. So you have to have like you said, a relationship or an understanding of money and how things work. The supervisor has to understand what her expenses are. And then the split is a natural outcome of what those expenses are. If 70% of every dollar you take in the front door goes to expenses, you can't give the associate a 70% split. That leaves 30 for you, and you're spending 70 just to keep the lights on. You went backwards 40 cents in every dollar. You're not going to be around very long.
What's very unfortunate, at least from where I'm looking, is that many group practices throughout time have been bamboozled and almost wrangled by new hires and demanding the splits when the numbers don't even suggest that that's even possible. Yet the business owner is so desperate for income to come in because of what you just said that they're willing to sell the farm for a little bit coming in, if that makes sense at all. And so over time, what ends up happening, these group practices are struggling and they're not even making, the owners aren't even making any money themselves for all the risks that they take. And I'm talking about they're taking the whole risk right on the front for many years. They're locked in, they can't get out of the lease, or if they do, it's very expensive to get out of a lease. Or expenses like your HIPAA compliance, your PCI compliance, which I know that about 85% of the group practices here in Texas are not even touching. Why? Because I hear business owners say, "Well, I can't afford that." Well, you can't afford not to. Why can't you afford it? And it goes back to they've been bamboozled in taking those high splits in not their favor in order to keep somebody happy. And then it leaves the business owner not very happy and it just doesn't go well, right?
Well, if you start from the premise that this is a math equation, then everything flows from that. It's when you don't do that is when you get in trouble because then you start getting or determining what your splits should be from somebody on a Facebook group that doesn't know what their split should be. And we all get in this group and go, well, that's what she's doing and that's what he's doing. So I guess I'll do that. Why would you base your splits on somebody else's expenses, especially if they don't even know what their expenses are?
I'm just going to
That makes no
do
sense.
a general statement, and it's not necessarily true for all, but some business owners don't have a good relationship with their money to begin with either. I'm going to probably start encouraging this more in future trainings that we do for supervisors is spend $10, go to Half Price Books and buy Dave Ramsey's Total Money Makeover. It will change your life. My husband and I did this back before the dark, if you will, the lawsuit that just, ended up being 4 years long. And had we not have done the total money makeover prior to that, I mean, we are debt free. We've been debt free. And so when the lawsuit came along, we were able to limp through it, not very well. But had we been in debt prior to that, it would have been game over, Philip. So take some time, buy Total Money Makeover by Dave Ramsey. Read it. Do it. It will change your life. You will be much more secure with the numbers don't lie. And you can get out of debt if you do it the right way. So that's just my plug there.
Well, we wouldn't have covered every topic on this particular point if we didn't bring up the whole idea that you big, bad, mean supervisors are trying to take
It's
advantage
interesting because it's still going
of
on the social
associates.
media platforms that I follow, and you have no idea what supervisors have to go through to get to where they want to pay it forward. Actually, if you do the numbers one more time, they can make more money seeing clients than they can supervising you. For every associate that I have, there's 4 hours right in the month here in Texas. I don't know what it is in other states. So read your rule book and figure that out. But I don't just go in there and just donate 4 hours of my time. There's a lot of prep. So basically, there's a prep of at least for me personally, 5 hours on top of those four, right? And so the time it takes to do 1 hour of supervision, and I don't think people recognize that. Now, are there supervisors who just, wing it for 4 hours? Absolutely. But you get what you get. But that's not our class. That's not our course. That's not who I am around. The people that I am around are the people who want to pay it forward. They want to increase professionalism in our profession that has gone kind of off the rails. So the people that we get in our classes, which is really interesting, actually, we get supervisors who want to do our class because they didn't learn anything in the first 40-hour go around. So, well, we had two of
And
them,
there's been way more than one
in
of
our
those.
class. They came here because
Just this
they
last
don't
time.
feel comfortable doing how they're doing it now, which is really surprising. So I think the third thing is look around and see who's got a curriculum that can help them just do their supervisor best. We provide a very stout curriculum and we teach the curriculum to the future supervisors. So there's always stuff to do. You will
And when you say curriculum, you mean a system, not the
correct.
curriculum, for the workshop, but a curriculum that they can walk out the door with.
I think we're one of very few who do that. So if you really want to be a supervisor, check our supervision course out. I think the next one is in what, September? Not sure, can't remember, but it will feed
Mhm.
you. And what's really nice is that when all of our students, I will say, all of our future supervisors who are wanting to pay this forward and love on people, associates, and give them a really solid footing in this profession. They feel very energized. They have the curriculum. They could do whatever they want with it, but they're not struggling with content. Actually, it's probably more overwhelming that they leave overwhelmed. And I'd rather do that than anything, so they're not lacking for stuff to talk about or prepare for.
We had during a workshop, we had one participant that was telling us that she had taken a supervisor training course somewhere else, and after the workshop was done, she was walking out to get in her car and go home, and it occurred to her about halfway out
Yes.
that she had no idea what to do next. She had checked all the boxes that the state requires, but she's walking out going, "Now what do I do? I don't have anything for a program in place." So that was the genesis for, "Well, we can fix that
I'd
problem."
rather
And
them
so we
leave
have.
overwhelmed with content than the scenario that you just described, because that is absolutely the case with many who do repeats of the supervisor class because they still don't know what to do, which is kind of unfortunate. But it's a compliment, I think. I will take it nonetheless. But it puts pressure, right, on making sure that our course is first class. I feel like we do a pretty good job,
Yeah.
really.
Yeah, I think so. That's the 3 things that we do different that makes this course different is, number 1, there's chocolate involved. Number 2, we're gonna give you a plug-and-play system to take with you. And 3, there's a major focus on the rule book. I hesitate to call it ethics because everybody has a definition in their mind what ethics means. To you and I, ethics means what the state of Texas requires you to do and how they require you to go about doing it. Anything else you want to add on top of that, if you want to follow some other code of ethics, that's fine, just as long as you follow the state in which you're licensed in, follow their particular set of rules.
You need to know the federal codes that apply to you, the mental health professional, who is a healthcare provider, by the way, which equals HIPAA compliance. Just because you're using a HIPAA compliant platform, it does not guarantee that you are being compliant. That's on their end. If you don't know that you're HIPAA compliant on your end, give me a call because that's part of the federal compliance.
Mhm. If someone from the OCR office walked in right now to your office and said,
Yes.
"Show me your HIPAA compliance program," they don't want you to pull up your copy
Doxy.
of Zoom or what's another one? Doxy or any of those platforms and say, "I belong here." That's not what a program is. The program is to cover your
Yes.
backside. Their program is covering theirs because their legal department requires it. But anyway, the larger point here is that there's a lot of stuff that the average bear, the average licensee doesn't know. And we go over all that stuff. And some of it's kind of depressing. We hear, I had no idea. I didn't know that. I didn't know. We hear that a lot. But that's the whole purpose of this thing is to train supervisors so they can train the next generation. So the next generation doesn't end up saying, "I didn't know that." That's a big selling point. When an associate gets done working with one of our supervisor trainees, assuming they follow the bare minimum curriculum that we provide them, at the end of their time together, that associate will never be able to say, "I never heard that before." They will have heard it. "I didn't know. I didn't know." We're going to talk to Dr. Ken Bateman in just a few minutes, one of your longtime friends. What do you know about Dr. Ken
Yes.
Bateman?
Dr. Ken Bateman retired recently from a very long career. And we've been following each other for many, many years and corresponded via email. I took him to lunch on Monday and celebrated his retirement. Job well done. And it was a very good conversation. And of course, you know me, Philip, I always give people a gift, and that's what I did. He's somebody to listen to who has experienced being a professor in college. He is also another supervisor. He's also run a business for many years, a private practice group business. And he was on the LMFT Texas board for about 6 years. You know, you can just hang around LPC supervisors who've never had an associate or they've never run a practice for that matter. Dr. Bateman brings a lot to the table that I don't think he's really shared publicly. And my prayer today is that he will let her rip and give us some information because he's retired and he can say whatever he wants. Whether he says it or not is a different story. He is a gracious man, and that's why he's a gracious man. So I will say that.
Well, we'll be right back and we'll just find out what he has to say. What do you think about that? So, Kathleen, I open the door and look who's standing outside there, Dr. Kenneth Bateman. You two had lunch this week. Good morning, Dr. Bateman. Appreciate you being here.
Well, thank you. It's nice to be here. And yes, we did have lunch this week and had a nice visit. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, and Kathleen is fond of showering people with gifts. So, what did you get?
Well, I got, first of all, a lunch. She even bought my lunch. And then I got I guess you called it a wall hanging with, it said officially retired. And so, and that's almost true. Actually, it'll be the end of this year when my license, I will actually retire it completely. I'm still seeing a couple of supervisees, but I'm not seeing clients anymore. Just seeing some supervisees and doing some consulting when therapists call and ask for help.
Ken, if you could just give people your portfolio of experience. You've touched every single point in our profession in terms of being a professor and a private practitioner group practice owner, obviously supervisor for quite some time in teaching courses, ethics, the whole thing. And then on top of that, you thought it would be a really good idea to be a board member for the MFT board here in Texas. So when I look at you, I look at you're the full package and you've seen it all, you've done it all, and you have a wealth of information. The first question I want to ask you though is you have followed the licensing board I am certain, from their dishes days through the last 6 years of the BHEC agency. And what is your overall assessment of the state of licensing in the mental health profession in Texas?
Well, I think we're making great strides, and it's better. When I came in, I was licensed in 1986, so it's been a while. And at that time, we had to drive down to Austin and go take the exam there and then wait for, I think it was close to 6 weeks to find out, did I really pass or not? And fortunately, by the skin of my teeth, probably. No, I don't know what it was. But anyway, I did get past and I came back and said, okay, this may be something I can do after all. The board itself at that time was a big, lack of a better word, it was a big monster. I mean, everybody in school that I had gone to talked about the board, about they're out to get you and they're going to destroy you and take your license and all of this. And they may have done some of that in the old days. I don't know if you remember any of the public meetings that we used to have back before BHEC, and they would line you up there if you had some kind of infraction, and um, you know what the flagellants are. Well, that's kind of what it was. It was a beating sometimes, and a few times that I observed that. I remember one time, particularly the board meeting was here in the Metroplex, and I had gone to it, and a young lady that I'm not sure of her age, but anybody's young compared to me. So she had done something, and it's not what I would call a major infraction. And they talked to her and kind of ran her over the rules, and all of that. And then when they were done and decided that she could keep her license, but she had to do some supervision, et cetera, some CEU hours. Another one of the board members who was a professional member began to question her about something else. And it's almost like she was trying to bring up something else. And I thought, if this is the case, we are in big, big trouble. That was one of the issues. Now, the other issue that really, in regards to where the board was and where it is now, was the issue that I know you and probably all of your listeners are aware of, was the delay in any kind of response from the board. I remember doing supervision with people, getting them finished with their supervision. And of course, they had to continue supervision until that license came across. But sometimes it would be months, literally months. And so as a result of that, it was just very frustrating. It was frustrating for them because they had to continue to do supervision, which meant they had to continue to pay. I charged for supervision. And so they had to continue to pay for that time, even though they had completed all the requirements listed in the rules. Well, of course, I'm sure it's no secret to your listeners and you all that the board finally got themselves in good trouble with the legislature. And they said, if you all aren't going to do anything, we'll take care of it. And I really did fear from some of the probably the scuttlebutt I heard, I really did fear that maybe they were going to do away with our license completely. And if I remember correctly, the LPC license only came into being in 1982, I believe it was. And I thought, well, I just now kind of got my license in 86 and now they're about to take it away, so I was kind of worried about that. Then BHEC came in. I have to confess to you that I was also afraid of BHEC. I am not a fan of big government. The more imposing you are in my practice, in my life, the less I like it. So I'm a competent person. I feel like I can handle things pretty well. I'm not saying we don't need some oversight. That's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying that I was worried they were going to take it too far. Of course, there was a big concern because we are so divided in our profession. You're either a psychologist, LPC, LMFT, social worker, and those are just totally different. They have no bearing together, right? They are so similar that most of the public cannot tell one from the other. And unfortunately, though, it seems like or I was worried that on the boards itself, the individual boards, that it would be one where the psychology board seeming to have a little more clout at that time than any other, that they would take over. They did not do that. Probably a lot of the credit there goes to the director. But anyway, so we went through quite a process, I guess you would say, in that time, working on BHEC and finally getting it to happen. In 2016, a person who had been on the board said to me, Ken said, I think you need to apply for the board. And I said, why? That was my first question. And what's involved? And I didn't obviously look at it closely enough because I went ahead and filled out the application at the governor's office. And to my surprise, because I'm not very political, although at that time I was doing a radio program with Judge John, and we were doing early morning, which was a thing in itself just to get up. But that was the only thing. And it was probably more to the right than it was to the left. So that was the only way I figured I got in because I am not real active in any of the political parties here. And so I did get the appointment and I served on the board for the 5-year term. I enjoyed that. I learned a lot. I learned, number one, that with BHEC, at least having come in, the board members, they're the 5 professional and, of course, 4 public. But the professional board members, they were not out to get people, even though they wanted to protect the public. And we certainly had much opportunity to do that. But they were interested in what can we do to advance our profession and make it better, which is one of my big things and has been and still is that we do not have a very good reputation in society, I don't think. When my wife and I got together, her father was a clergy, and when he found out that we were seeing each other and he found out I was a therapist, he said, you got to be careful. You know what those therapists do, don't you? They have sex with their clients. And I promised her I would not have sex with the client. I know that's kind of a egocentric type of example, but I think there are a lot of people who kind of think, well, that. The other thing in teaching, I was amazed at how many of the students, and I taught in an adult program. I taught at Amberton University. from when it was amber to when it became amber 10. And a lot of the students were second career coming into it. How many of them thought counseling was, I'm going to tell you what to do and that'll fix it. That'll fix you. And I know it works because anytime my wife tells me what to do, I do it. And so I figure clients are going to do the same, right? Probably
Does
not.
her dad know you married a counselor?
Yeah. No, well, no, I married a teacher. And
No, you didn't. You married a
the
counselor.
truth of the matter is, every once in a while in the relationship over the years, which have been many, she has said to me, "You are not my therapist." And I have sometimes said, "And I'm not your 4th grade student." So so those things. Well, back to the board. I do think the board is making progress. They have made strides in being fair. The penalty matrix was a good example. Before, penalties by the boards, especially pre-BHEC, could be all over the place. You know,
Yes.
Kathleen, you're a nice looking woman, so I'm not going to give you a bad thing. Now, Phil, you messed up. I'm going to really hit you.
All right, bring it, bring it.
And I don't mean that it was constant, but I did see some, or at least what appeared to me, sitting back in the audience and watching and listening, that they seemed very kind of random in regards to when they chose who they were going to do and see. So
Somewhat subjective, huh?
yes, yeah, correct. But I think it's making progress. The rules, some of the things they've done that I do like for the clinician anyway, that consolidated rule book for any of the licenses has been a real benefit. And the amazing thing is they've kept it up pretty well. I have the people that I've supervised, and like I said earlier, I'm supervising 2 right now. This is the least that I've supervised as a group. But when you're winding down, you're trying to get done. We actually go over the rule book, not item by item, but I look for new things and advise them, because there's nothing worse, which also happened pre-BHEC. You wouldn't know what was going on. Rules could change, and if you didn't happen to be in the know, like you two who really monitor it closely, thank you. But if you didn't know, if a rule could change and you could be violating a rule without your knowledge and not intentionally,
And
but it's
ignorance
still a
is no excuse
violation.
of the law.
Yeah, it's still against the law, so
Contrast the
you're
difference
still in trouble.
between when you practiced as a family therapist and what you are seeing now. And what are the top 3 issues you think are impacting the American family the most right now?
Early days versus now.
Early days versus now. Some of those things have always been there, but I think some things are so much more pronounced now than they ever were. And if I were looking at the top 3 things, the first thing I would say is the main concern in relationships and couples right now that's working on them is finances. People are struggling today, and they have been for a long time. It's not something new. And, but however, I think it's exaggerated right now with young couples not being able to get a house. So if I divide marriage or the years of marriage into kind of 3 divisions, one is pre-children, children to getting them out of the house, and then maybe older age up to retirement. Money is a factor in every one of those. Maybe not as much in the first one, except if couples want to buy a house, and that creates struggle. But then in the second, when we have children, wow, they are expensive. And if I'd known that, I'd have had children anyway, but they are expensive. And then in your senior years, you begin to think, do I have enough money? Have I prepared enough? And according to the statistics federally, a lot of our senior adults are living off of Social Security, and that puts you pretty much at a poverty level or close to it. So finances are one of the big issue, which the finance putting such stress on couples then is the issue of how do we handle this? What do we do? And the stressors will either build a couple and cement them eventually, or it'll drive them apart. And that's where we come in as couples and family therapists, is in what do we do to help them deal with the stress that's in their marriage. In fact, I used to tell couples the most important thing in any relationship is your commitment. Because if you're not committed to this relationship, you're going to get out. Eventually, you're going to get out, or you're going to want to, which is just about as bad because you act like you're out. And I'm not talking necessarily, although I believe in marriage and having the legal aspect of marriage as well, but I'm not. It doesn't matter whether you're married or just cohabitating. If you have a commitment, you might be able to make it. If you don't have the commitment, you're not going to. I mean, sooner or later, you're going to have that discussion about where are we going to go to dinner tonight? I don't know. Where do you want to go? I don't care. Where do you choose? Well, I want to go to have Indian food. No, I don't want Indian food. Well, then what? And it rolls into discussions or perhaps arguments sometimes. So teaching them how to deal with that stress, teaching them how to have a commitment, and that things are going to change. The person you married however many years or days ago, as far as that goes, it's not the person you're living with today. So keeping that in mind. So money is one of the big issues that brings problems. Family is another issue. And if you are fortunate to be in a family that accepts not only your spouse, but you as the child, you're really fortunate. But in some cases, the family still accepts their biological child, but they're not so crazy about that new person who's come into the house. And this is especially true in some of the alternative relationships, so that, for instance, if they do not marry, some parents are very judgmental, or if, as we're seeing more and more, they have a multiracial marriage, so that they just are not willing to accept that other person. A quick story, if I can. Friends years ago, and I mean probably in the early 80s, and I had met him at a restaurant in Kokomo, Indiana. I never will forget that. And we're sitting there and having lunch, and a couple walks in, an African American and Caucasian couple walk in, and he tells me how bad that is, and it's just awful that those two are together. Now, fast forward, because of time, I didn't see him for years. And the next time I saw him, however, was again at a restaurant, and we were eating. We had been at a meeting together. And I was asking, how are your kids? Oh, they're great. And talking about his daughter. And you know the rest of the story already. She had married an African American, and they had 3 beautiful children. His attitude had completely changed. So it's that acceptance. But if you don't have that, it can be very difficult. If you don't have the backing of your family, that's a problem in our society, that a lot of couples don't have that. And so they miss out on what's going on. The child rearing years, that's another segment where it's a lot of opportunity for misunderstandings, and it's tiring. My granddaughter, by the way, is graduating next Tuesday from high school, and I am so proud of her. But what I know is I haven't seen my daughter as much in the last probably 2 years as previous, because the kids are all involved in all these things, and they're busy, and when we're not busy, they're busy. And, it's just difficult to see. So it's hard to do that. And I know my daughter's tired. She won't admit it, but I know she is, because she works full time, and raising the family, all of that is stressful on couples. So giving them the support they need there. This is where I wish we had more mentors, and that could help with the adolescents in particular, through churches, through various clubs, having a program for kids that really builds them, not just. When I was growing up, the church I attended was in South Bend, Indiana, and the University of Notre Dame was close there. And one of my brother's friends, my brother was 10 years older than I, but one of his friends happened to be a football player on the University of Notre Dame. And he came over, began to come over to the house. Well, as a kid, 10 years old or 11, I thought this guy was superhero. But he was the neatest guy, and through his college years and beyond, he stayed there in that area, and we stayed friends until his death. He was a mentor to me. He would come over and get me sometimes and say, "Ken, we need to talk." Too many of our kids don't have that. And when I work with families, sometimes as I work with the adolescents in the family, I would realize that they needed they needed somebody else. Because you and I both know that you can say something to your child and they take it, but they forget it. But somebody else who they really respect says it, and it's all of a sudden, yes,
Mm.
I'll do it. So the third part is the retirement age, and the interesting thing, in fact, the thing that almost kept me licensed was working with senior adults in family therapy, and it was with their adult children, and that's another crucial area that I don't think has been paid quite enough attention to in our society or in our counseling programs. We like to see the younger people, and most of our therapists are younger. But, I've seen cases where there was just miscommunication between the parents and the adult, that we were able to work out sometimes some things, some misunderstandings that the adult child had as a child, or the parents said that they didn't realize they even said, get those cleared out and what a difference it makes. I've also seen where adult children who, in my opinion, were at least verbally and emotionally abusive to senior parents, especially if there was a sibling that they were jealous of. The three things, but the three of therapy.
Have you noticed in the last 20 years an increase in, I think, what the popular culture is calling estrangement, children from their parents, children that refuse to see their parents anymore? You know what I'm talking about?
Yes, yes. And I have seen that. Now, over society in general, I'm not sure how much it is. Our profession skews us a little bit because that's who we get to see. My parents won't talk to me. They won't come in. They or they don't want to be seen. The kids don't want to be seen. And I think some of that is almost fostered by some of the attitude of our current society and division. And God forbid that your child marries somebody else and decides to go to a either different political party or different religion than you, and now we have to cut them off. That's the crazy thing. We can't tolerate anybody. We cut them off. We say, no, you're not, you've lost your way. No, they've taken a different way. They've seen, but to separate the family, to alienate them and not see parents anymore is cruel. I think we're going to be seeing more of a fallout of that actually in years to come. I really do think it's going
Yeah,
to.
that's an interesting point to make an interesting survey about how much of that is ideologically driven versus any other potential driver. How many of the participants are from the right versus how many of those participants are from the political left? Just to find out what's driving that.
That'd be a great dissertation study for somebody.
There you go. I'll get right on it. Now, speaking of dissertations, you've taught at the academic level. So, what are your thoughts on the state of the academic pipeline that's producing the next generation of mental health counselors?
That's a great question that I do not know the answer to, but I will tell you my opinion. There are some schools that are doing a great job. They are teaching the curriculum, and the curriculum it pretty much is defined anymore. Unfortunately or unfortunately, that was if there was anything I didn't like about academia, that was one of the things is I could only teach this certain stuff. Sometimes I wanted to go other places. Now, the issue where I say that there are so many teachers, professors that are doing good. One of the things that's really helped from the time that I graduated and I think to now, the old saying that those who can't teach those who can do. Well, I don't think that's as much true in our field as it was because most of the professors nowadays, I know where I taught, every professor also had a private practice or worked in a practice. One I remember worked in a church setting, a counseling setting, but everybody else had their private practice. And I would not I would not take anything for that. You can teach from the textbook, but the only actually this is the first time I've ever said this publicly, but the only correct real theory is the one that I'm gonna write. Did you get that? But every time you read something, that their theory is right. Well, no, not necessarily. So teach the theories, let them examine what is it that fits with them, and then move forward. I am bothered by some of the supervisees and students in training that have talked to me about their professor was leading them or emphasizing alternative lifestyles, that type of thing. I don't think that's our business. Our business is to teach the curriculum, teach them how to be good therapists, and then let it go. But it just bothers me when there seems to be, and again, this is third party. It's them talking to me about their professor who they felt had kind of shut them down because they had not agreed with the alternative view that the professor was offering. And I know academia is supposed to be a place for freedom, but it's only freedom if you're teaching what I want you to teach, right? You know
Mhm.
what I mean? It's like, and I'm not saying that for me personally, but I'm saying if I have this horse that I'm riding that I want everybody to accept, and that's the only thing I encourage you to go that way, that's not right. The goal is to teach young people therapy and us older people too. The goal is to teach them how to think critically, how to think without being just molded into somebody else's way of thinking.
Well, you're advocating for viewpoint diversity, and the problem comes into play there when one ideological faction gets to define what that is,
Correct. Yes.
you know.
Yes, and an extrapolation of the university is the supervisor. And if the supervisor adds to that, the supervisor has, I think, more power than we need, but it's an inherited power because they have to see us weekly, or for LMFTs, you have to have 1 hour a week. For LPC, it's 4 hours a month, and you can do that in blocks of time, is what I understand. So anyway, but if I have a particular viewpoint that I want to stress, I can certainly do that. And I have to be careful not to always express my viewpoint. It's not important if we're talking politically, for example, or theologically or philosophically. My viewpoint is not germane to what I'm teaching them and what they're doing in their practice. My goal is to help them to be the best they can be. Now, if we differ too much, then I probably am going to refer you to some other therapist because you need to be with somebody that you can like and appreciate. And if you can't appreciate my points of view, we probably won't continue. But it's interesting in my supervision, and I can't even tell you how many people I've supervised. I started supervising in 1990 and have never been without supervisees since then. In the beginning, they were more willing and open to learning. But now sometimes and this has been a while because I've had really excellent supervisees, but sometimes when you recommend an article or you want them to read a book or something, it's like, well, no, I don't have time to do that, or I don't have time to write. Tell a supervisee to
There you
write a
go.
paper. And
That's right.
I'm not going to write it. I don't want to write it anyway. Good supervisees will write it, and they will learn, and they will come back and say to you, "Yeah,
Tell them to write it in cursive, and they'll seize up
Mhm.
in a total vapor lock.
yeah, but that's what I really love," because years ago, I took one of those courses on handwriting, so I tell them, "If you handwrite, I will know a lot about you."
Or find out what you're really thinking. Well, Kathleen and I are going to land the plane here in just a minute, but before we do that, I've got one more question for you. I want you to look into your crystal ball and tell me what you think the state of the profession is going to be in 10, 15, 20 years. Not what you hope it'll be. What do you think the profession is going to look like in 15 years?
It's a great question. In 10 to 15 years, one, I think there will be more of a pronounced ideology in the therapists will begin to separate into camps almost. This one with this with this. So I think I'm not sure that's a good thing. The other is I think hopefully it will be an advance. I'm on the fence, so to speak, with all this stuff about the new things they're doing with some of the medicine and that. One, I don't think as a therapist that we should necessarily be doing that unless you really have a doctor that you're working very closely with. My fear is either hurting somebody or getting somebody that I think needs to go on this particular treatment modality. But that's I think it's being pushed right now. Whether that'll stay, I don't know. The other thing is I'm hoping that we will have found new and better ways to efficiently work with families and individuals, helping them solve their issues more quickly. It is sad that one, the length of time for therapists is very short for people to be in therapy. I mean, but all my time I have been looking for how can we do this more quickly and more lasting so that if I'm working with somebody who's anxious, that I can teach them some tools, give them some tools that they won't need to come back and see me. The depression, they won't need to be depressed the rest of their life. They will recognize the difference between a down day and depression and be able to move on and live productive, happy lives. If not, if something doesn't change, we're going to continue to see more and more people who are depressed and doing the crazy things that people are doing right.
And since all of those ideas that you're mentioning come from the university system, we got to clean that up first, don't we?
Yeah. Yeah.
Speaking of,
Okay.
Kathleen, next Friday, which is the 29th, as of this recording, the LMFT board meets, and we're going to phone our comments in for that. And then the BHEC Council meets June 16th, about 6 weeks out now. And I'm going to do my best to talk you into driving to Austin with me again. And if anybody wants to participate in that, anybody can call in by Zoom and read public comments, or you can drive with us. If you're up in the Metroplex area, you can drive with us and find out all the details about that on the Austin BBQ Club page, link in the show notes.
There you go.
It's a lot of fun, and we eat barbecue when we go. So, Dr. Bateman, if you're looking for something to do June 16th and you're into barbecue and pork ribs, come
I think
on.
we're having our 4th annual conference in Carrollton, Texas, which is 15 minutes away from DFW Airport and about maybe 20 minutes from Love. And we're going to have a 3-day beautiful, it's just going to be wonderful. Our topic, Philip, is empowering clients. We're really going to talk about informed consent, really what it is, what it isn't, and how we should be a little bit better at that. Plus, we're going to have a myriad of holistic approaches to actually true recovery for mental health, most of which does not come from any synthetic big pharma pill. So that's what makes this conference very different for mental health professionals. And it's a wonderful time for fellowship for counselors who feel like they've been disenfranchised. Last year was off the hooks. It was really special. A lot of food involved, but a lot of fellowship, and they didn't want to leave. I think we did our job well.
We get a lot of feedback that this was different than any mental health conference I've ever been to, and it's a lot more fun. Well, Dr. Kenneth Bateman, thank you very much for doing this. We appreciate it. I'm sure there's another lunch or two for you and Kathleen in your future, and I'm on my own. I can live with that. I appreciate everybody carving out another hour of your week to be with us again, and I need you to try and be good.